ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Future Energy TV. We are, of course, here at the Future Energy Conference in Cape Town, South Africa. I am Didi Akinyelure, and it's a pleasure to have here with me Clem Sunter, scenario planner. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you very much,
So
Didi.
perhaps you could start by telling us, what is scenario planning?
Well, the whole point of scenario planning is that because the future is so uncertain and unpredictable, you cannot forecast it. And so we feel it's much better to look at different scenarios, possible stories about the future, look at the flags, which could suggest which scenario is coming into play, apply probabilities to the scenarios, and do that on a dynamic basis because, of course, flags pop up all the time. And then, obviously, as the probability increases on a scenario because of the flag, you've got to look at the opportunities and threats contained in that scenario, and then you've got to act quicker than your competitors in countering the threats and following the opportunities. And the one example I always quote is Pierre Wack, who was my mentor and who was head of scenario planning in Royal Dutch Shell.
Okay.
He wrote a scenario in the late 70s of a second oil price hike before it happened, and the oil price went from 12 to 32 or $33 a barrel. And Shell acted in advance on that scenario and made a lot of money out of it. And it's just a much better technique. And we've written a book called Mind of a Fox, The Mind of a Fox, because foxes have very bright eyes so that they can check out the flags and the threads, the scenarios that flow out of the flags, and then they have the agility to respond with the challenges.
Interesting when you made that connection with the oil and gas industry there. I wonder how that ties in with what's going on today, because we are in a very volatile environment. This time last year, oil prices were perhaps around $50. Now we are heading towards 81. We've seen worse times, we've seen great times. What are your thoughts on how we can sort of manage all this?
You know, I'll go through some of the flags that our international clients have raised with us. The first being the religious flag, Middle East, and the fact that you've now got Sunni Shia, you've got polarization in the Middle East, and you've got Mr. Trump, putting huge amount of pressure on Iran with further sanctions. And obviously, the risk factor in the Middle East is written because that is a very negative scenario where America and Iran could come to a genuine conflict, and the Strait of Hormuz is such a sensitive area for oil supply. So obviously, coming out of this scenario is you've got to attach a probability now to the oil price going through $100 a barrel in the next few months. I know America is now self-sufficient, so it's not going to hurt them, but of course it's going to hurt all oil importing countries. Yeah,
and how does that affect us here in Africa? So perhaps you could bring that to the Africa context.
Yeah, well, in fact, it was one of the other flags which really is big for Africa, which I call the gilded cage. It's the idea that the West is putting a gilded cage around itself because of immigration, because of all kinds of things, and Trump saying America first. And if you think about it, the guiding principle since the Second World War was globalization. And here you have all these populist movements wanting to go back to nation states, which means that for Africa, they're going to have to really rise to the challenge of how to penetrate that gilded cage with their products and everything else in a way that in the last century we were all opening up. So yeah, it's a bit of a red flag, but I'm sure Africa can rise to the challenge.
Perfect, let's leave it there. Clem, it's been a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was, of course, we had with us Clem Sunter. He's a scenario planner.